Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out for tonight's special meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the Town of Pelham. This hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham is a meeting being reconvened to consider the development applications relating to 20 Allen Crescent. All submissions and comments submitted at the initial hearing form part of the record on these files and will be considered in the committee's deliberations. The purpose of this continued meeting is to consider new information relating to the application and for the committee to render a decision. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please contain your comments to the new information only and address your comments and questions through the chair. If you have previously spoken, your comments are still valid and there is no need to repeat your submission. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. There are colored forms for this purpose on the back corner of the table, which are available on the back table. If you have submitted a form at the last meeting, we still have your information and you will receive the decisions. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances and with 20 days of the mailing of the decision for the consent applications. The panel tonight consists of, on my far left, Mr. Bernie Law, my immediate left, Mr. Bill Sheldon. To my immediate right is Holly Wilford, who works in our clerk's department and is acting as our secretary for tonight's meeting. At the post in front of us is Mrs. Nancy Bizzato. She is the clerk of the Town of Pelham and also secretary-treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Furthest down on the line is Mr. Derek Young, who is from our engineering department. Next to him is Mr. Curtis Thompson, who I'm surprised to actually see because I understand he's just got back from a vacation. And of course, closest to me at the pound is Mrs. Barb Weens, who is the director of planning. The file number, first of all, the chairman is going to use his discretion once again. And, hold on a second. We've done the call to order. Are there any members have a pecuniary interest in the general nature of the applications being heard tonight?
I do not.
I have none.
Neither do I, Madam Secretary. We have not heard of any requests for withdrawal of the applications being considered, have we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we have not.
In that case, I would like the committee to consider kind of amending the agenda. We were originally going to start with the variances, A28 and A29. I would rather we proceed initially with application B11-219, which is the conveyance application on the property at 20 Allen Crescent. Can I have a mover for the amending the agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Bill Sheldon? Mr. Bernie Law seconds. All in favor of advancing the agenda? In that case, we will start with consent application B11, 2019P, regarding the conveyance at 20 Allen Crescent, Lot 18, Plan 271 in the town of Pelham. Ms. Wilford.
Committee of Adjustment hearing, Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. Committee of Adjustment hearing. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. Please wait to speak at the public portion of the meeting and only speak while at the podium. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated, including comments about staff, the applicant, etc. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons will be asked to leave. Please note, at the Committee of Adjustment hearing on January 14, 2020, files A28 to A29 2019P and B11/2019P were considered for the subject lands known as 20 Allen Crescent. The committee deferred all files requesting additional information from town planning staff. The committee requested planning staff to provide more information on defining what neighborhood the subject land is part of, and more information on Pelham's official plan policy B1.1.3. Please note the original town recommendation report dated January 14, 2020 still applies in its entirety and continues to represent planning staff's professional opinion. All comments and written submissions continue to form part of the record and need not to be restated. Additional public comments have been received by Deborah and Keith Powell, Ted and Angelina Galata, Jim Morando, Tony and Yolanda Bostock, Jan Chamber. Please note these comments and all others received regarding process have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members and planning staff. Planning Report Addendum to Recommendation Report. New information as requested by the committee to be read in full for the record. The addendum is dated February 25th, 2020. At the Committee of Adjustment meeting held on the 14th of January 2020, the above noted development applications were considered for the subject lands known as 20 Allen Crescent. After a lengthy public hearing, the committee deferred the applications sine requesting additional information by town planning to include defining what neighborhood the subject land is part of, and more information on Pelham official plan policy B1.1.3. The original town recommendation report dated January 14, 2020 still applies in its entirety and continues to represent planning staff's professional opinion. Previously, there was confusion amongst the committee members as to why the minor variance applications were not considered prior to the severance application. The reason the applications must be considered either concurrently or in the alternative specific order with the consent decision preceding the variance is because the variance are zoning requests associated with the proposed reconfigured lots. Simply, the committee cannot approve site-specific variances on parcels which do not exist. There were also confusion amongst the committee members regarding whether or not the lands in the East Vaughan Hill secondary plan area would contribute towards the annual 15% residential intensification target. Firstly, the following provincial policy statement, growth plan, Niagara Region official plan, and Pelham official plan definitions may prove helpful before continuing further. Redevelopment means the creation of new lots, uses, or lots on previously developed land in existing communities, including brownfield sites. Residential intensification means intensification of a property, site, or area which results in a net increase in residential units or accommodations and includes A. Redevelopment, including the redevelopment of brownfield sites. B. The development of vacant or underutilized lots within previously developed areas. C. Infill development. D. The conversion or expansion of existing industrial, commercial, and institutional buildings for residential use. And E. The conversion or expansion of existing residential buildings to create new residential units or accommodations, including accessory apartments, secondary suites, and rooming houses. Delineated built boundary. The limits of the developed urban area as defined by the minister in consultation with affected municipalities for the purpose of measuring the minimum intensification target in this plan. Designated greenfield area. Lands within settlement areas, not including rural settlements, but outside of the delineated built-up areas that have been designated in an official plan for development and are required to accommodate forecasted growth to the horizon of this plan. Designated greenfield areas do not include excess lands. The majority of the East Fawn Hill Secondary Plan area is a designated greenfield area, as opposed to a designated built-up area, which is illustrated in both the Niagara Region Official Plan and Pelham Official Plan. Any net increase of dwelling units within the delineated built-up area would contribute towards the minimum annual 15% target and consequently the 300 total dwelling units. What is the neighborhood? In the province of Ontario, there is no land use planning definition for what constitutes a neighborhood. No definition exists at the regional or local municipal level either. Researchers and academics have not agreed on any exact definition nationally or internationally. Neighborhoods are usually spaces defined as a precise geographical area. However, this varies widely depending on jurisdiction. Many also consider the concept of a neighborhood as a functional set of social networks or an area with considerable and consistent face-to-face interaction. From an urban design perspective, a neighborhood is often described as the area that can be walked within 5 or 10 minutes threshold. Consequently, a neighborhood is a challenge to define as it is used to describe spatial, social, and complex human networks. Ultimately, neighborhoods mean different things to different people. If we consider that official plan policy B1.1.3c references how a zoning application could increase the unit density up by 25% of the existing gross density of land within 300 meters of the site, the committee could interpret the neighborhood at a 300-meter linear distance based on this specific policy. Planning staff caution this rudimentary neighborhood measuring metric in lieu of another acceptable definition, as its real-world application is rather arbitrary. A 300-meter radius around the subject land ignores the horizontal confinements of the linear street network and true geographic context. Similarly, a 300-meter linear distance in all directions can simply ignore the daily social interactions of some residents. For example, some neighbors may logically consider a street beyond 300 meters in one direction to be part of their own neighborhood. However, in the opposite direction, it may be considerably less than 300 linear meters. With regards to the official plan policy B1.13, I will read the new font in red. The downtown Fonthill core is approximately 600 linear meters from the subject lands, where the larger neighborhood shopping plazas and 3 public elementary schools are less than a kilometer away. This is the comfortable walking distance for the average person. If the committee resonates with the 300-meter linear distance as a neighborhood-defining metric, as in the subsequent policy, please note that the original cited neighborhood density examples above were already taken into the spatial range. The committee should be aware that if a zoning bylaw amendment application is pursued, the prospect for a more intense or an alternative building type, i.e. multi-units, could be invited. The proposed frontage and area of severed lots is indeed smaller than the default R1 zone. Neighborhoods with a range of lot sizes is not inherently of a negative quality. It provides for a variety of choice, which is considered to be a benefit. Compatibility with the established character does not mean the same, but rather means coexisting in harmony, and the change is not so significant to create an adverse impact. By their very nature, neighborhoods evolve and change all the time, and it is important that they do so to maintain vitality and to be sustainable. If neighborhoods and communities did not evolve and change, they become stagnant and can lead to a decline. Again, the question is the degree of change so significant to be adverse? It is planning staff's opinion that in this case, the degree of change by the creation of one residential lot for single detached residential use and the associated minor variance will not result in an adverse impact on the character of the street or neighborhood, and therefore the change is compatible and the new dwelling can coexist in harmony in the context of the existing neighborhood. At the hearing on January 14th, 2020, the committee did ponder whether or not a rezoning was warranted. As mentioned above, zoning bylaw amendments are allowed to request changes in the list of permitted uses, whereas minor variance applications are generally restricted to amending the numeric provisions. The official plan recognizes that additional housing growth via residential intensification, especially in walkable neighborhoods, is an opportunity and a way to achieve other important goals such as helping support the local businesses and public service facilities, providing a diverse housing supply, sustainable demographics, maintaining existing infrastructure, and neighborhood vitality. The objective from a land use planning perspective and as is articulated in the town's official plan are to encourage the diversity of housing in an effort to accommodate a range of income levels, encourage intensification and redevelopment within the urban area, respect the character of existing development, and ensure applications are physically compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood, to maintain and enhance the character stability of the existing and well-established neighborhoods by ensuring development and redevelopment is compatible with the scale and density of the existing development, and to encourage the development of neighborhoods which are compact, pedestrian-friendly, and provide a mix of housing types, community facilities, small-scale commercial centers, and open public spaces. The proposed consent and minor variance applications contribute to fulfilling these goals, and provide for one additional lot in an established neighborhood results in development that at its scale is appropriate and compatible with the existing neighborhood, provides a degree of choice, contributes to the development of a compact neighborhood, and to the stability of the neighborhood is enhanced by the investment in the neighborhood. Planning staff's original recommendations for all three development applications remain unchanged.
Thank you, Ms. Wilford. Gentlemen, do you have any comments you wish to make regarding the summary of the report?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, if you would like, I can read the recommended consents, conditions into the record.
Certainly.
I just needed a quick drink.
Certainly.
Application file B11/2019P 20 Allen Crescent. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals, dealing with appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. In planning staff opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that consent file known as B11/2019P be granted subject to the following conditions: that the applicant obtain final approval of necessary minor variance or zoning amendments, conduct an archaeological assessment and receive clearance from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, ensure the new lot is serviced with an individual 20mm water service and 125mm sanitary sewer lateral in accordance with the town standards. Installation of any service will require a temporary works permits to be obtained and approved by Public Works Department. If existing services are proposed for reconnection, such services shall be inspected by the Public Works Department to determine their condition is satisfactory prior to connection. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Submit a drawing indicating the location of individual water services and sanitary laterals for all lots to confirm no existing service breaches from or through any proposed lot lines to other lands and from or through the remnant parcel to other lands. Locate cards for all lots shall be required after the installment of new services. Submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parcels demonstrating that the drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. to obtain approval for a driveway entrance culvert permit for the new lot issued through the Public Works Department to town standards. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Reinstate part of the westerly curb of the existing driveway apron of Part 2 to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Plant 2 large caliper trees from the town's approved street tree planting schedule along Part 1 frontage, one on each side of the new driveway, and to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. Obtain and close a demolition permit for the removal of the attached canopy and shed to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. Sign the Town of Pelham Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining the development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes are required prior to the issuing of building permit. Provide the Secretary Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. For application file A28/2019P, 20 Allen Crescent, Part 1, planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with the appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. In planning staff's opinion, the application is considered a gentle form of residential intensification, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend the application number A28/2019P be granted as follow and subject to the following conditions. That the applicant, at the time of building permit, provide building elevation plans that positively reflect the neighborhood character through the use of compatibly pitched roofs, windows, doors symmetrically apportioned to the building's mass, and the concurrent use of exterior cladding to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development, and that the approval of the minor variance is subject to the consent file B11/2019P being approved. File A29/2019P, 20 Allen Crescent, Part 2. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application number A29/2019P be granted. The above decision is suggested to have the following conditions: that the approval of the minor variance is subject to consent file B11/2019P be approved. And that is it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Gentlemen, do you have anything to add to the comments, or do you agree with the planning report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again for reference, I'm Craig Rowe with Upper Canada Consultants, representing the property owner. We are in agreement with the additional information provided by staff and those recommendations. Maybe just a point of clarity that Mr. Young could provide, it noted a 20 millimeter water connection. I believe that would be 200, correct? Just for the conditions to make sure it's right.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a 20 millimeter water service?
In the conditions, it said 20 millimeter.
Yeah, minimum is acceptable, yes.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. From a planning perspective, I don't have any formal additional comments to provide tonight. I'm certainly available to answer any questions of the committee members or provide clarity on any matters. With me this evening is Mr. Patrick Maloney, who's legal counsel for the owner of the property, and he just has a couple of remarks before we begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Patrick Maloney. I'm a partner with the law firm of Sullivan Manny in St. Catharines. I am going to address all three applications at one time. I get what you did with your motion, but because my comments are relatively general, they do apply to all three applications. I don't intend to get into the various planning comments that the committee has received. You received two reports from the town's planning staff, planning justification report from Mr. Rowe. You've heard the opinion of Mr. Rowe, you've heard the opinion of Mr. Thompson and Ms. Weens, and you've also heard the opinion of the residents. The committee did defer the consideration of these applications to address two aspects. Mr. Thompson did provide an addendum to the original planning report that addressed those two questions, and we do agree with that position. I did briefly want to get into the legal aspect of this. In your capacity as members of the Committee of Adjustment, you are required to make decisions based on the planning merits of the applications and not necessarily concede to the will of any opinion. In particular, the Planning Act says that the Committee of Adjustment or a decision of the Committee of Adjustment shall be consistent with and conform with the provincial plan in effect, which is effectively the growth plan in this case. At this point, the only expert evidence that you've heard, whether it's tonight or in January, were the qualified planning opinions from essentially three land use planners, the two planners from the town and Mr. Rowe. And those opinions were that the applications are consistent with the PPS and do conform with the growth plan. Their opinions also address the consent and the minor variances and the tests under the Planning Act. And in their opinions, is the applications should be approved pursuant to that. Now, I do, and I completely understand the concerns of the residents. Here you have a consent application in an established residential neighborhood. However, the province of Ontario has prescribed a set of policies in both the PPS and the growth plan that support the type of infill and intensification that is suggested in this application or proposed in this matter. The applicant has proposed a development application that is consistent with and conformity with these policies. He has chosen to prepare or complete a severance of the property. He could have sought a higher density development, but in speaking with Mr. Mancini, he indicated that it was his decision that the more compatible type of development would have been a single detached dwelling, and that's what he's applied for. And that is the policies upon which he has conformed with in the planning report or opinion that you've received from both the consulting planning and the town's planning report. So it is these same policies that you, as a decision maker and a member of the Committee of Adjustment, must follow when you make your decision. So to sort of summarize, we're asking that you approve all three applications you have before us based on the conditions that were recommended, and we have no problem with any of the conditions imposed against the consent and against the minor variance. I recognize that there was some discussion in the last occasion and some opinion that a zoning amendment might be more appropriate. In that regard, we feel that you should approve the variances as applied for as minor variances and that a zoning amendment is not necessary. However, if you feel that a zoning amendment is necessary, you can approve the consent before you today and make it subject to a condition of zoning. That's not the ideal way of dealing with it, but it is another method of addressing this. We do feel that you should approve the variances as applied for and that a zoning amendment is not necessary. So subject to any questions, I'm sure you will have. Those are all my submissions along with Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe and Mr. Maloney. And now I guess we'll open the floor up to comments from people in front of us. I would like your comments basically to address new matters that are being brought up tonight. Please don't bring up things we brought up in the previous meeting. Is anyone willing to speak? Please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and please direct your questions and comments to the chair, and I will request members of staff and the developer's consultant to respond in due course. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Please come up to the podium.
Thank you. My name is Jim Mirando. I reside on Highland Avenue, 5 Highland, and that's in the neighborhood. At the, and I hope I don't overstep my bounds, We've heard all of this recent information that's been brought forward, and it's all anchored to policy, provincial, regional, and whatnot. I just want to talk about the bylaws in this town. At the last meeting, Mr. Curtis mentioned he located and measured one lot on Highland Avenue that was in comparable size to the newly created lot. That house was built over 30 years ago and has been occupied by the current owner-occupant for over 30 years. Not by an absentee landlord with tenants of dubious character. This house is in full compliance with the R2 zone. Part of Highland Avenue is zoned R2, part of it is zoned R1. So this one comparable lot is zoned R2, and there are no, what's the best word for this? Nothing bad about it. It complies to all of the zoning bylaws. Zoning bylaws, like all laws, are very important because they try and promote the greater good and they protect people. In this case, they establish the bare minimum standards for all relevant setbacks, lot coverages, total size of the property, its uses, etc. These zoning bylaws protect all the citizens in our town, not just our neighborhood. The zoning bylaw cannot and must not be compromised, and the new properties being proposed must be in accordance of our zoning bylaws. I think it's incumbent upon us, everyone here, to acknowledge that we must enforce the town's valid zoning bylaw when it deals with intensification. The next item I'd like to mention is the inside setback on the existing property. In other words, adjacent to the proposed new lot line. Okay? The existing, pardon me, let me catch myself. The minimum standard for Zone 1 is 1.8 meters, and they are proposing 1.2 meters. Again, that 1.8 meters is a minimum standard. That's the minimum, the bare minimum of the bylaw. If the severance is granted, it would create a violation to the zoning bylaw because the house is already there, and you put the lot line, this proposed lot line, 1.2 meters away, you're creating something that is, oh dear, is in violation of the zoning bylaw. So what does that do? You can't move the house, and given that fact, you can then safely conclude that granting this severance would show a disregard for the zoning bylaw and show a bias toward granting the other three identical variances that will follow. With all respect to all here, let's just enforce the zoning bylaw. Rezone to a lot, rezone to a lot that is fully legal and compliant. In doing this, it will come before an elected town council for approval, who, by the way, were asked not to attend this meeting tonight. Anyways, there is a process available, not a shortcut, not to be approved or denied, it is to be approved or denied by our duly elected responsible officials, our counselors. Look around. There are a lot of people here, homeowners who are objecting. 44 more signatures, gentlemen, of people from the neighborhood. 22 last, 44 additional from the neighborhood who are not fond of this proposal. In fact, they object to it. Why do they object to it? Because there are serious concerns about the property values being affected negatively. Houses in backyards. Every backyard should have a house. How does this enhance our neighborhood? Anybody? It doesn't. There are five more situations very similar to this. In fact, a couple of them are better than this, within 300 feet of my front door. Maybe someone should consider a limit on intensification in a small little neighborhood. Intensification, for the most part, does not enhance, but downgrades neighborhoods. It's concentration and desecration. Without proper zoning under a valid zoning bylaw, that's what's going to happen. The minimum standards will be compromised and reduced, not to the benefit of the neighborhood. There is good intensification and there is bad intensification. I urge this committee to do the right thing. I urge them to render no decision and defer to the zoning bylaw. Not only in this case, but in every future intensification, desecration, and concentration proposal. People before profit. Thank you very much. Who can I give these 44 signatures to?
The clerk will take them.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Bizzetto, we'll take those. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak on the matter? Yes, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
I saw you put this down. It's shorter now than it was before. Okay, we're good. Some of my comments cross over between variance and severance. Oh, sorry, let's do that first. Ted Galata, 5 Island Crescent. We good? Okay. several comments. One is regarding water. We discussed that last meeting, but after that, I got thinking about this, and there is sections of the provincial policy statement that have reference to situations like ours. And a quote that being, it's in a built-up area where the need of storm... Okay.
Please respect the gentleman on the podium.
Apologies, Mr. Chair.
It's in a built-up area where the need of stormwater controls, that was done before the need for stormwater controls, and it already experiences stormwater management problems. Now, although Elizabeth is served by storm drains, the only ones that serve Allen are at the bottom of the street in front of 6 Elizabeth and across at the street from it at 8 Elizabeth. Now, we all know that the lots at Allen and Elizabeth were built large to absorb the drain and septic beds of the years ago. However, our larger lots with the sandy soil also serve the purpose of absorbing and draining most of the runoff from the roof water and snowmelt. Having said this, we still have problems with our storm runoff. And ignoring this and building more homes would result in more hard surfaces that would push more water, carrying leaves, road sand, and debris down to the street. And at the same time, I submitted with those photographs. Now, it started out as 19 Allen. I knew the people that used to live there prior to this, and they had to put a grate up in front of their garage. Water was running down from the street into their garage. So the grate takes the water in and around back, and it's still staying on their property, but it empties into their backyard. So having thought that, I went back to the current owner, Mrs. Smith, and she said, I asked her to tell me more about it. And she says, well, yes, she still has that problem, and not only that, she also had to do remedial work and to raise her garage floor because of that same issue. And if you note, 19 Allen, in the photographs that I have provided, are directly across the street from 20 Allen. And 20 Allen is at a higher elevation than 19. And example B in the photograph that I provided, it's one of the 2 storm drains. Now, these pictures were taken in January. And it's in front of 6 Elizabeth. And the homeowner at 6 Elizabeth has had repeated problems here with this drain. And in a heavy runoff, rain with leaves and road and sand blocked that drain regularly. And once it's blocked, additional rainwater and more debris onto the driveway, and it goes up onto his grass. So that's B. Now, number C, I was listening to, I believe it was Mr. Law. He went on quite a bit about the problems on Elizabeth when you lived there when you were younger. And then when I went home, it was one of these eureka moments. And I remembered back when I went down Elizabeth last summer, and they were putting in a speed bump in the Victory Gardens subdivision area. So that was 1 week. And a week later, I went back, and they were closing off the speed bump at the ends with cement. So then I thought, this is not a speed bump, okay? This is for water diversion. And so again, like Mrs. Smith, I went down to the Victory Gardens and I asked a resident. And I said, okay, tell me more about this speed bump. And he says, well, it's 100% for the purpose of diverting water. And then, and again, I provided photographs for that as well. So this goes on and just says that, yes, we have a problem in this area, and any other development is going to make it worse. Now, since I talked to these people, I also wanted to have their name available and their phone number, because in case you, as a committee, wanted to contact them, gain more information. Now, that was my initial reason. But I had the second reason after thinking that, and this was submitted in January 20th, this was submitted to the town. The second reason, and it's one that I wasn't surprised, but in effect I find it inexcusably inconsiderate that the town planners that want to promote this did not pick up the phone and say, Mrs. Smith, by the way, like I did, do you have a problem? Does this exist? Or like the people at Victory Gardens, no one from the town phoned. And they did not care. And they're not caring about the citizens that they're supposed to represent. Now, to continue on with the water and expand on my comments on storm sewer management and the Golden Horseshoe Growth Plan, they say that we are to incorporate green infrastructure. Now, Allen Crescent doesn't have these large ponds like the new developments have, but we do have the green infrastructure in the large lots that absorb the rainwater. And without it, the town, by building up more houses, they don't have any alternative or strategy to get around this, because these, again, were built at a time when there are no storm sewers there. I have a few more submissions. Now, this one also goes to Variance. Can I continue with this, Mag? Perfect. Now, and this one is on the topic of is the variance minor in nature? Now, the town planner says the proposed reduction in lot and lot frontage are minor in nature given the surrounding area, and the small lot sizes are increasingly becoming common throughout the town, region, and the province. Now, we shouldn't be comparing this to other areas. The new development coming in should be compared to what is there now, and since the planning department raised the issue of throughout the province, I did a review of other city official plans and how they treated intensification. And there was a common theme throughout. And if you sum it all up, it says it's to respect the character of the existing neighborhood, to protect the existing neighborhood is a fundamental concern, and new development is to be compatible with the existing in scale, density, size, and shape of the lot. And although the town planner and his report says it in the same way as they sort of superficially gloss over the water aspect, just because they say it does not necessarily make it true, and I do not think that this can be compatible with our neighborhood. Now, also under desirable for the development of the planning report refers to 20 Allen as underutilized open space. Now, in this, I gather Mr. Mirando and I were thinking the exact same thing, but separately, because I worded as, this is not underutilized open space, it's a backyard. And what the builder is attempting to do is build a house in a backyard. And if this is the aim for the planning department to view anything except the smallest of properties as underutilized open space, then every citizen in this town should be concerned and afraid the direction of this planning department is taking us. I'm sure many residents in our town would see this redevelopment of 20 Allen as not desirable for our community. Now, still staying with not minor, there are some legal precedents I sent to you, your way, and I won't talk much about them, but they do say that something can be not minor for two reasons. It could be not minor because it's too large or too important. Now, in this case, too large, I think the variances requested by 20 Allen should not be permitted for both of these reasons. The fact that it's too large because collectively the variances allow for another lot that would not be compatible in size to the others in the immediate area. It's too important because one severance leads to a precedent. A precedent leads to more redevelopment of such properties in this neighborhood and beyond. more severed properties lead to a change in the character of our community in a negative way. And such a concern is warranted, and that's evidenced by the large number of people that have come out on the 14th and are out today, and with the everybody that's submitted on their information. And they're strongly opposed to this. Not just the people that abut 20 Allen immediately, it's the people that live further away as well. They, still staying with, is it not minor in nature? Although I've submitted some of those previous cases, and some are court cases, some were, in this case, OMB cases over the years. The more recent ones I just didn't have access to, but that's only happened within the last few years, so I couldn't get anything. There's one, we'll call it Melling versus North York, and the issue as to appropriateness and whether requested variances are minor comes down in parts to the particular area to be considered. Variances to permit proposed lots which fall below the range of the lot sizes and frontages prevailing in the area are not minor. If I may continue, another subject if I can. Okay. Fonthill lumber. During the last meeting, several people expressed vocal concern and surprise when Ms. Weens mentioned that Fonthill lumber is not considered in intensification because it's industrial. Now, I contacted a representative of the Provincial Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs to get more clarity on the subject. When I phoned him, it was a conversation of, I explained Fonthill lumber, but I didn't expect anything in depth from him. But it's just like, this is the issue. We got a lumber yard was built in 1951 on the outskirts of town. Town has now grown up, and now the whole story where now it has become redundant, and now it's being used for another purpose. Now, he said that on that topic, that a municipality, he speculated that a municipality might want to maintain its industrial status in order to keep it for future industrial purposes as an area for potential employment. However, as it's not used that way, as it now being used for residential, he said that would not be the case and couldn't offer any further explanation. He did say that it was up to the town to decide what is to be attributed as intensification, as well as what areas in nodes or corridors where they to exist. And the definition of intensification, we've done that here tonight, and nowhere does it indicate a past use. But it does talk about brownfield. So if a brownfield can be rehabilitated into something that could be used residentially, then certainly Fonthill lumber can be resurrected like it is now and be used for intensification, then used for our target of how many? 300? Is how many over? Is it?
I believe we're looking at 300 units over the next
16 years.
20-year planning period within the urban areas. Am I correct, Mrs. Weens, on that?
That should be about right. That was one of the ones where I read this to my wife, and she says, pare it down a bit. So I scratched that part out. So that was part. So 300, I recall. Now, according to the official town plan, there is intensification corridors. And the intensification corridors, they talk about downtown, Highway 20, Canberra, Pelham Street, Pelham Town Square, Station Street. And as such, that sort of, although they don't name Fonthill lumber specifically, they do mention Pelham Street, Highway 20. They also mention it in another way, and they say that there are transition areas. Transition areas are those that are located adjacent to the downtown designation and are intended for the use of mixed residential and commercial uses within existing buildings or through redevelopment that is complementary to the downtown. So I can see that picture that as being exactly what's happening with the Fonthill Yards right now. So that's why I'm saying I think it is that should be added to our intensification quota. And although it was mentioned previously about the East Fonthill project, and it's something that I could even see that as being intensification, because you've got this town border on one side, you've got development on other two sides, and it just looks like a large intensification area. No one, since it was a tree farm, no one's going to come along and say, I'm going to make a cornfield back out of it. It's just not going to happen. So its primary purpose going forward should be residential. And so you're not taking away any potential farmland from something. It's not like avoiding urban sprawl. So, but that's up to the town to decide what they consider to be intensification is. Only a couple more. Okay, now Mr. Morando said something about there should be a limit on intensification. Well, or someone should have thought that there should have been a limit on intensification. Well, yes, they did. And in the official town plan, it does say that there are areas that they want to intensify, and they're named specifically. They're named downtown, like I said, and Pelham Street. They name Canberra Road. But it also says this does not preclude any consideration for other sites in the urban living designation. But that's provided these sites they abut arterial roads. So we're talking about, say, like Canberra Road, or are located at most 100 meters from the intersection of an arterial road. And according to the official town plan, with that 100-meter limit, 20 Allen is outside of that 20-mile limit, outside of that 100-meter limit. It's greater than 150 meters. And that seems to be something that the town wants to either gloss over. But on one hand, you can't say we have to stick with the provincial policy, we have to stick with the official plan, and still go ahead and say, oh, by the way, we don't want to pay attention to this other part, the part that says, really, 20 Allen is in an area that shouldn't be intensified. There could have been a reason why. Maybe people that wrote it said, okay, well, the infrastructure may not be able to support it. Maybe it's old infrastructure, so we don't want to develop certain areas. Maybe they want to concentrate on those things that are close to a major street where it's easy to tie in. Something like that residential place that's right next to Keith's. It's right on the main street, or where Keith's used to be. So it also could be they don't want to disrupt the neighborhoods as they are. And that's what we're saying, is that we don't want our neighborhood disrupted. So otherwise, if you go with the way the planning department is looking at this, then anything that is in this town that is any size is up for grabs, and say, yes, we'll intensify it. Yes, we will carve it up. And that is not planning. That's unorganized, and it's haphazard. Like you'll have one here and you have another one there, whichever one, whenever it comes available, a developer will come along and say, I think we'll do it here. And the planning department says, okay, well, sure, why not? Let's gloss over the part where it's not it's not an area where it should be. This is one you haven't heard before. I submitted a lot of these to you, but you've heard it in a certain different form. Now, this is something that the address is not important, but the criteria is important. And you heard this criteria a couple of weeks ago. And this is regarding 6 Brucewood. Totally different situation here. But again, think of the criteria. And this is the criteria that our town planner used to justify Brucewood. Brucewood probably went through. Big house, I gather, and he wants to make something bigger. It's also in an enclave, like Mr. Sheldon said. It would be an enclave like Allen is on an enclave. Now, the justification the town planner used that is that this project will not negatively impact the character of that neighborhood. Whereas he's focusing on the neighborhood immediate, when he speaks of Allen, he's speaking of the larger neighborhood of the town, the province, the region. He also says that the deviation from the bylaw is marginal on Brucewood, considering the size of the subject land. Well, the deviation on Allen is not minor, it is major. He says that there's plenty of space for stormwater drainage. Now, he mentioned that multiple times in his report to you. Now, just like I've talked to you about the water issue, and although the planner wants to gloss over it, there are problems with drainage on Allen Crescent. He went into a more of a personal aspect. The neighbors were not unduly affected. The neighbors around us feel that they would be unduly affected by this project. He also says that on Brucewood, there's privacy buffers that remain. Well, yeah, there's privacy buffers. The privacy buffers on Allen are being taken away. So it's quite the opposite. The design is compatible with the neighborhood. Well, I don't see the design as being able to be compatible in our area. And with Brucewood, he says there's still open space for recreation in those yards. And I don't see that in this proposed area, especially when he's referring to 20 Allen as underutilized open space. So, I've got the conclusion here. However, I do want to take a little bit of a sidestep here. And because it was brought up, I wasn't going to mention earlier we don't have a walkable community. It probably never necessarily was because of the hills. But I don't like the fact that the town planning department is putting the walkability argument forth. There are people that move onto Allen Crescent, and I've talked to them about it, and I say, they're new to the neighborhood, and I'll tell them that you're close to downtown, and the reality is you can walk downtown if you like, but most likely what's going to happen is you're going to go just like everybody else. You're going to get in your car, you're going to make those multiple trips. You're going to go to the bank, the grocery store, or the hardware store, but it's in your car. So we don't necessarily walk to the hardware store and back. It's not, and if you have a walkable community, you have to have something to walk to. And in my experience, the only walkable part is that if you go to Sobeys and you walk over to the liquor store, you've got your car parked there and you walk back and forth, and that's about it. And so when they say, yes, you can walk down to some place, you have to have something to walk to. And there are places that I have experienced. And the ones that fit the bill most effectively were I had go to visit our aunt on an occasion. And it's my wife's aunt, and she lives in England, small town. And they have a better concept of this. And what the usual visualization is the shops are smaller, therefore they're closer together. They might have a parking lot behind the main street so that you go and park in that parking lot and you can walk to these small stores. And the only thing close to it now here in this area would be Niagara-on-the-Lake. And it's that idea, parking lot behind, you walk along the street. But Niagara-on-the-Lake probably couldn't exist either if it wasn't for the tourist aspect of it. And so I can understand that. I don't blame the planning department for not having a walkable community. It's part our fault too. We want the large Sobeys or well, actually, maybe I shouldn't be targeting Sobeys too much around here, but the large box stores. But that's just the way it is here. But I don't like the fact that they want to use that as an argument. So, in conclusion, okay. Many have given their opinion on this development, and I've tried to convey on the January 14th how Allen Crescent and Elizabeth Drive, it's a successful neighborhood in its present form. It's a street that has homes for people of all ages, but while the city planner refers to 20 Allen as, again, underutilized open space. On the 14th, I previously explained the environmental, economic, and social factors that must be considered according to the provincial policy statement. And at that meeting, Ms. Weens admitted that they did not look into social factors. And in response, after I brought up social factors, it's sort of like she was sort of squirming and trying to find a socialization factor and said, yeah, we could say socialization. Getting a different kind of housing in here would be good for that because it gives a variety of socialization. Now, along with others, I've given proof on how this minor variances and is not appropriate, and I've offered you the OMB and those court cases as an examples. I've showed how that we have stormwater drainage problems on our street and we don't have any catch basins, while the city planner ignores the issue of stormwater. I have shown you that the planner has applied certain criteria to, in this case, Brucewood, and if he was to take those same criteria and apply them to Allen, this 20 Allen Crescent would not be a go-ahead for something that would go ahead. Now, I've also shown that it's incompatible with the official plan in that location distance at being greater than the 120 meters. And the city planner wants to ignore this as well. They commented on it, but they wanted to justify it. And justifying it by saying, well, we don't want to, I can't exactly say what they said, we don't want to disregard this 20 Allen, which is a possible good candidate just because of that distance factor. So we've had a lot of negative reasons why, or a lot of reasons why, as to why 20 Allen should not go ahead. And to quote Mr. Thompson from the previous meeting, he said that what he does is he takes all the correspondence from the public and other agencies. Then he weighs against the planning policy principles and practices. At that point, he says he forms an opinion. And then he offers that opinion to the committee. Now, in a perfect world, that sounds good. But we have had many negatives that I think were disregarded. Valid reasons why this shouldn't proceed. Now, and I would even invite Mr. Thompson to say, okay, I would like you to reconsider. I would like the town to reconsider their position and not only not go forward with this proposal, but actually come to our side and say, yeah, this is not good for Allen Crescent, based on what you've heard from me and from the rest of us. And I think I'm done.
Thank you. Very well thought out, and thank you for sticking basically to the new comments in your latest correspondence, which actually is all included in our agenda. And I'll let you know it was between pages 60 and 74, and did include copies of the pictures. Okay, and I do sympathize with you and the public that are here. But I'm also going to give an opportunity. Right now, I would like to ask various members of staff if they wish to make comments on the presentation you just made, and also the developer's representatives. So the first issue brought up was stormwater, and I would ask Mr. Young of our engineering department to maybe offer his comments on that particular issue. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The stormwater issue with regards to Allen Crescent hasn't been urbanised yet, which means you don't have the curbs, you don't have the gutters, you don't have anything to catch the water. When Allen Crescent was originally designed years ago, the rainfall intensities were not that high. It wasn't, the storms were short and didn't last very long. Today, it's a different story. Climate change is a big thing. The rainfall is intensifying. Elizabeth has been urbanised. There are curbs down there. There are catch basins on Elizabeth. The lot sizes in the area being so big do absorb some of the water. But due to the intensity of the rainfall that's coming down, it can't catch all of it. And there will be runoff. And it will go from one back garden across the road into another garden. It's just the flow of water on a hill. The road would need to be urbanised, which means we'd have to go in there, put curbs in, put catch basins in, do the full stormwater management on the road, which could potentially destroy the character of Allen Crescent by doing that. Because a lot of the gardens are flat, they have nice frontages. Urbanising it changes the whole perspective of it. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the residents all living on Highland Avenue have seen the change when it went from being, similar to what Allen Crescent is to having curbs and gutters down there now. I know when we did that road, a lot of the residents didn't like it. Sorry?
Still don't.
Yeah. So the stormwater side of it, yes, we can look at it. Managing it, as I said, it would take the urbanization of the road to deal with that runoff.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Make no mistake, I am not asking for sewers. I'm just saying they don't exist, and we have a problem. And the addition of additional houses is only going to, and their driveway is only going to create more problem. And although anyone may say, yes, you have to keep your stormwater or from your gutters on your land, that doesn't always work, because you're going to have one gutter that's going onto the driveway, that's going onto the road. So, but the people of Allen, I'm sure if you were to ask all 16 homes there, they're not going to want, you refer to it as urbanization?
Urbanization.
Okay, or putting in sewers? Okay, we don't want that. It's like we don't need it. We do know that there are problems, but we don't want the problems exacerbated. And saying, okay, well, let's not only do 20 Allen, but let's also do the street, the house next to it, or the house next to that, and that is going to be really bad.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm only addressing the stormwater issue that you brought up. I'm not discussing the severance. You brought up the stormwater issue. I'm trying to explain what the stormwater issue is currently.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Currently, that is the issue that's on Allen Crescent, and the way to resolve that issue is to urbanize your road.
Okay.
Okay. Whether the severance goes through or not, if you're having stormwater issues now and you need them resolving, that's what it would take to resolve those current issues.
Okay, that's fair. Okie dokie, we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Young. It's apparent that the town engineering department recognizes that there are issues with stormwater in that general area, including probably the condominium, because you did mention it, the Victory Gardens have seemed to have had to put some type of a little asphalt, something across the one driveway that comes off
It
of.
It looks like a speed bump.
But it acts as a dam, and it makes the water continue
it's even labeled
down.
as a speed bump,
Yeah.
because they're not going to know anything else other than that. I've talked to a neighbor that says they don't like it. They don't like having to do it because it interferes with, I guess in her case it was her trailer, getting in and out. And just for anybody in this room, I would not suggest driving over it because it scraped the bottom of my car. So If you don't have to do it, use the other entrance.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Young. Thank you for your comments, and I'm sure the residents realize that, it is something the engineering department and the town of Pelham have recognized, and hopefully sometime in the future it may be rectified with the approval of council, of course. Mrs. Weens, do you have any comments you may wish to offer us based on Mr. Galata's presentation?
Mr. Chair, through you. Mr. Chair, through you. There was a number of things that Mr. Galata spoke about. Most of those things are addressed in our report. I don't know that I need to go back and revisit the items that we talked about. Certainly the rationale for why something is minor is planning staff's opinion. And Mr. Galata does not agree with that, and we can accept that he does not agree with it, but we have based on our planning opinion. And so I don't want to get into a debate and argue about that. Other examples from other cities in terms of the infilling policies or intensification policies. Certainly lots of municipalities have intensification policies in their official plan, and those work for them. We have our intensification policies in our official plan, and we've evaluated this application based on those policies. And again, they're fully discussed in our report. So unless there is a particular question, I don't really want to get into a debate about it. We stand by kind of what we have said in our report.
May I ask?
Thank you, Ms. Weens. I'm going to go around and I may start again. Mr. Rowan, Mr. Maloney?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll keep my comments brief because a lot of what was said by Mr. Galata was addressed at the January meeting, and I understood from the beginning of this meeting that the comments were supposed to focus on the new information that was before this committee, and so I'll keep it very brief. In terms of some of the stormwater management issues, Mr. Young has addressed that. I can also say that one of the examples he used was likely a poor design of the dwelling itself. When you put a driveway in that slants down, you're going to have water draining towards the house. But in this case, Mr. Chair, this would be an application for a building permit that would require a lot grading and drainage plan. And so you would avoid those type of situations. And the other part of it is Mr. Galata did refer to a number of different intensification policies within other official plans. I'm going to steal this comment from you. I apologize. I think everyone except one was outside of the growth plan jurisdiction. So the intensification policies would be different in those municipalities. It's not the same here in the town of Pelham. So subject to any further questions, that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Is there anyone else in the audience? Mr. Galata, do you want to ask another question, sir?
May I? Ms. Weens, it's about the Fonthill lumber.
I think...
Is that intensification or is not?
Ms. Weens?
So, Mr. Chair, the Fonthill lumber site really doesn't have any bearing on this application. The lands are in what is referred to as a delineated built boundary, and that's being identified in the growth plan. There are intensification policies that apply to lands within the delineated growth or delineated built boundary area. The regional official plan identifies the delineated built boundary, and that's also included in our official plan. Also in our official plan, the lands are designated urban highway commercial. There are no policies in the urban highway commercial that speak to intensification. The intensification policies and the 15% for intensification in our official plan are directed to the urban living area and the downtown designation. So when you look at it from a top down, yes, it is infill and intensification. That's not just, that is what it is. But where we apply our 15%, according to our official plan, it's in the downtown, it's in the urban living area designation and the downtown.
Thank you, Mrs. Weens. I hope that answers your question.
No.
It does for me in a way,
Yeah,
because
in a roundabout way. I'm just saying, okay, if you don't want to call it intensification, then don't come after 20 Allen, because you're saying, oh yeah, we don't want to count it. Theoretically, it is, but we don't call it that. You're building homes there. People are going to live there. So, to me, it's your choice. Okay.
Certainly,
Now,
Mr.
on
Chair,
the-
through you, I
Yeah, hang
also
on a
would
second.
like to say that the intensification targets are a minimum. They're not a maximum. And so even if we include the Fonthill lumber yards in the intensification targets and we exceed, that's not considered to be a bad thing. So, that it's okay to include it, but the targets that are set in the official plan are also a minimum target.
thank you, Mrs. Weens. Mr. Galana, do you have any further questions, or can we move on to?
I think we can move on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak to the matter at hand? And basically, remember, we only want to discuss things that are new on the agenda and not the past.
Oh, and I did believe that anything I submitted was new. Some of it may be based on additional from the last meeting, but I believe a lot of it was.
Thank you very much. You've done a lot of work on your proposal and your comments. I know I've received them very well. Thank you very much, sir.
Hello again. My name is Foster Zanuto. I live at 18 Allen Crescent. I'm next door to the property in question, just to the south, so the immediate neighbor to the south. As you suggested, Mr. Chairman, we've had a lot of issues related to around this development proposal, and while we're not going to be reviewing all of those, I thought maybe I could just hit some of the headlines, especially for those who were not here at the last meeting. And just very quickly, we went through a lot of issues, such as the bylaw issue and not respecting our bylaws, establishing precedent and the comments on that, infilling guidelines, provincial, regional directions. The one that I noticed tonight, which is new to me, we talked about the removal of 250-year-old trees. And I noticed that that's not in the conditions for the employment. So we are going to lose those trees, conditions for the construction. So we are going to lose those trees because they are not listed as exceptions in the building requirement. And that's unfortunate in terms of our minimal contribution to climate change issues. And there's drainage issues, aging infrastructure, storm sewers, and the cutting up of spacious lots, and the destruction or demolishing of perfectly good and well-built homes to create 2 or 3 vacant lots, which are worth more than the current one. And that's in fact what, if this were to go through, that's in fact the position that I would be in, that instead of selling my home now in the way it is with the lot and the house, it would be more profitable for me to destroy the house and come to the committee asking for 2 variances, just like the one that's being requested tonight, which can be handled on my lot. And that would realize a profit higher than what I can get for my existing property. And I think Mr. Sheldon referred to that kind of scenario happening should we be approving variances which are beyond the bylaws for these small lots. And finally, changing radically the character of an established neighborhood and going against the wishes and appeals of every resident in the area. So as you noted at the January 14th meeting, we've bombarded you with comments, and we've also communicated with town councilors the clerk and the planning department. And I think we will continue to provide that kind of input to stop inappropriate development in our established communities. Last month, I wrote a letter to the editor of The Voice, our community newspaper, explaining our plight to the general Pelham community. I subsequently received several communications from outside people from outside our neighborhood in support of our fight to get this proposal denied. Actually, I was surprised at the comments I received. Some people were hostile, some were incredulous, and I had comments like, why would the town do this? Why is this happening? Are developers calling the shots? Why is the planning department standing behind developers and not its community? And this is crazy. This is just not right. These are kind of the comments that I got from people who phoned me when they read my letter in the paper. All of these comments and discussions have sort of prompted me to sort of sit back a little bit and think about this and provide some introspection here in terms of asking myself, what is this really about and why is this happening? Is it about one lot and one residential building, or in the case here we're talking tonight, is it about, eventually 3 lots and 3 buildings? Because that's my prediction, and I know it's hearsay, it's speculation, you will call it, but nevertheless, I have the right to say that I have a prediction here that if this is approved tonight, that in the very near future, we'll see that house demolished, and you will be asked for 2 variances exactly the same, because if you look at the plans, those 3 lots will be exactly the same size. So we're going to eventually have 3 houses and 3 lots. 3 lots on 3 houses on that property. And again, that's just a prediction, which we can do what we will with. In any case, I don't think it's about one lot, one building, because, if this developer is allowed his requests, surely we will have other developers requesting to do the same. Sure, the planning department has said to us that precedent is not considered in planning proposals. But that's not really for them to say. If a new developer wants the same as what this developer wants and gets, the new developer will use the word precedent because it is his to use, regardless of what the planning department says. And if the planning department denies a second developer who will, working across the street, for example, wanting the same thing that Mr. Mancini is requesting, if the planning department denies him, he will claim discrimination, favoritism, injustice, and he will threaten litigation. And the planning department will back down. So this is not one lot approval. It is opening the gates to massive intrusion and a sad destruction of our established communities by commercial developers. I don't blame the developers. That's their business. But it is our decision to decide if this is what we want. So is it about infilling? Well, there's a lot of discussion about infilling, and we had some good information tonight. Is it about increasing the municipal tax base? Hard to believe that it could be about the tax base, because we've got all this housing going on, steady increase in million-dollar homes, and it's hard to believe that we need to intrude on established neighborhoods at the expense of irritating and annoying long-paying taxpayers in those neighborhoods. Well, we do have an infilling quota, which has probably been established by bureaucrats in Toronto or at the region. And those bureaucrats and politicians outside of our town of Pelham have defined acceptable infilling according to previous land use. For in some cases, a ridiculous notion if I've ever heard one. And we've heard that tonight, that we were told that Fonthill East isn't considered infilling because it's greenfield, and the Fonthill Yards doesn't qualify because it was industrial. And who knows about the arena property? Is there a qualification for arena or parking lot or tennis club? I don't know. Does this mean that infilling only qualifies if it is in an established residential area? I guess so. And if this is the case, we are dooming current long-term residents like us to a constant state of fighting City Hall against non-compliant development. Non-compliant. The bylaws do not allow this. A sad state of affairs, really. Isn't it time that we, the town of Pelham, create our own plans and definitions around infilling? We have a vision. We have a vision of our wonderful town, not the developer's vision, not Queen's Park, not the region. We need you, the Committee of Adjustment, behind us. And we need the Planning Department behind us too. I urge you to help us preserve our neighborhood heritages, much as like been done in Niagara-on-the-Lake, so that our town remains unique and doesn't fall into the pit of unfettered and inappropriate development. We respectfully ask you to support us by taking a first step tonight by denying the applications before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members of staff or the developer have anything to say in this regard? I realize it is our decision, and it is a decision that this committee must make, and we definitely thank you for your comments. We have in the past, we have had a month to review the documents we received in the first submission, and we've had the addendum for at least 2 or 3 days, so we've been able to look at that also. Now, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the matters at hand? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and we'd be more than happy to hear your presentation. Thank you very much.
My name is Robert Jensen. I live at 11 Island Avenue, right bordering this proposed property. First, I'd like to comment on Mr. Young's assessment of the stormwater on Highland. You said the residents weren't happy about it. I can say I was ecstatic when that happened, because I used to have water that came down Daleview and it made a right turn onto Highland, and just before my driveway it magically crossed the street, followed along my side of the street, and then came up my driveway. So good job on the storm sewers. That was good. We used to refer to it as Lake Jensen in my driveway. So just give me a second here. So there's some, the last time we were here, we were read a bunch of answers to our concerns kind of all at once, and I just wanted to touch on a few of those answers we were giving. So now, when it comes to zones, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the planning department indicated that zone boundaries were not actual physical boundaries and therefore open to interpretation. Through you, is that a correct assessment of how the planning department sees the zone boundaries?
Mr. Thompson?
Through the chair, no. Mr.
Thompson, could you go on and explain a little bit? And I realize that the official plan has an area on the nice drawing, it says R1, and it does include this particular area, as I recall from recent memory. Maybe you could elucidate a little further on your comment, please.
Certainly. My apologies. The zoning bylaw, or any zoning bylaw, they're fixed boundaries, and they are physical boundaries in defining or declaring what uses and performance standards can apply to any parcel of land. In determining the character of a neighborhood, to any person who is visiting a street, nobody knows where the zone lines start and finish. So that is why we still consider uses that are certainly within proximity and can have an impact on a property, but when looking at Schedule A5 of the Pelham zoning bylaw, are technically not in that zone. So it's all things considered. Does that help?
I think in a way it helps, because
if we look at Schedule A5, you will not find a property within the R1 boundary that is not compliant with the minimum 700 square meters. It's pretty definite, the zone boundaries. So,
believe it or not every property that is currently in the R1 zoning satisfies all the requirements of setback, lot coverage, floor area, height. And that's what your committee of adjustment is here to do. So that if somebody wanted to build a shed in their backyard that was slightly larger than permissible, they would have to come, and we would probably end up seeing variances on maybe side yard setback or rear yard setback, or where the pool can be located, or the height of the fence, which really enhances the value of the property, but is not necessarily in conformance with the requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Right.
So that's what your committee of adjustment does. And I think that's what Mr. Thompson was hopefully alluding to.
Okay. But when it comes to size, I don't see any properties within the R1 that are this small. So in your report, when you responded to the statement that bylaws were meant to protect the existing neighborhood, you made the following statement. Ironically, based on current lot sizes of Elizabeth Drive and Allen Crescent, the default R-zone requirements would have yielded narrower frontages, smaller lots, and more density. But if R1 minimum requirements were applied to this property, it just simply would not be allowed, right? I mean...
Mr. Thompson, I'm kind of missing it here. Mrs. Weens?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Through you, that's the reason for the variance request, is that these proposal does not conform to the R1 zone.
Okay. So, another answer found to the concern that this lot is not consistent with the size of the surrounding properties. The planning department's comment was, the proposed lot is marginally smaller than its immediate surroundings on Elizabeth Drive and Allen Crescent. The lots that border this property are 1,300 square meters, 900 square meters, 1,300 square meters. Across the street, the lots are 1,000 square meters or more. The average of the 10 closest properties to this one would probably be around 1,100 square meters. So how can 430 square meters be considered marginally smaller than 1,100 square meters? I mean, marginally means a little bit.
Sir, this is the decision that we, this committee, are going to have to wrestle with. We have the planning report, and they consider it marginal. One of the things that the committee has to look at is the impact of the variance on the neighborhood.
Yes.
So this is really one of the major tests that are required when we actually deal with the variances, and those tests were related to us in the original submission and in the previous planning report. So yes, that is something we have to deal with, and really it's a number. I believe it's question number 4, and we have to deal with the impact the variances might have on our decision, really. So
Okay.
I hope that answers your question, that we are looking at that as a committee.
Yeah, I have further comments on minor variances. So another concern was the comparisons drawn to nearby R2 zone properties. The planning report says that, or the planning justification report discusses existing development in the neighborhood, which is relevant. To make comparisons to smaller properties under a different zoning classification while drawing little or no comparison to properties in the same zone, in my opinion, is not a fair assessment. They drew a lot of comparisons to properties that are in a different zone. Lot area and lot frontage were compared exclusively to our zone properties rather than to the 10 properties surrounding this one that are 2 to 3 times larger, with lot frontages 50 to 110% larger. Like this kind of reasoning would make any property on the A5 schedule within the R1 zone susceptible to severance, depending how large you draw the neighborhood circle. I mean, you can look at that map and put your finger on any property and say, okay, right over here, there's this and that. And So that would essentially make the zoning bylaws redundant. So, and it creates a situation, without following the bylaws, it creates a situation where the planning department is going to, dictate the winners and losers, and nobody is sure what will or will not be approved. This creates instability and uncertainty with the residents if you don't know what your neighbor can build or can't build, because the bylaws can be just subject to, massive changes, right? So, under the minor variances in the official plan, it mentions what you were talking about. The committee will have more regard for the degree of impact which could result from the relief and less regard to the magnitude of numeric or absolute relief sought by the applicant. In addition, applicants who request a minor variance should be prepared to demonstrate a need for the requested relief based on the basis that the subject zoning provision is not warranted, causes undue hardship, or is otherwise impossible to comply with. That's item E 1.5 under minor variances. So which one of these bases did the applicant demonstrate that led to the decision to approve this is my question. Did they demonstrate that they weren't warranted, or they were going to cause undue hardship, or that they're impossible to comply with? There needs to be some sort of... do we have some elaboration on that? I just...
Mrs. Weens or Mr. Thompson, you wish to elaborate further on, or maybe even Mr. Rowe, if you could give us a little feeling of...
Mr. Chair, through you, again, I think you have all of that in both our report and submission and by the applicant in their submission.
I think that's what I was alluding to. Thank you very much. We have received lots of comments, and we have received a lot of information from our planning department and the staff in their planning report. And the gentleman that's bought the property, he's saying he wants to build something and he wants relief from these provisions of the zoning bylaw. Mm-hmm. And that has to be our decision. And we're going to have to weigh the current conditions of the zoning bylaw, requirements of the zoning bylaw, to what this gentleman is requesting. Mm-hmm. And that is the responsibility of the Committee of Adjustment as appointed by the Council of the Town of Pelham. So leave it in our capable hands. Okay. If you wish. Thank you.
Just a side note about my backyard, as far as our pool is concerned, was this considered by the consultant or the planning department? Any effects that this might have during the construction of this? This
was also addressed in the initial planning report. Mr. Curtis actually did a bit of a rendition, and I believe that was covered off in the original planning report. Mr. Curtis, am I correct on that?
Through the chair, yes. There's nothing further for myself to add.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see anywhere where the pool was considered. I mean, there's going to be a hole dug big enough to put a house in. It's going to be fairly close to where our in-ground pool is. I'm concerned with ground settling, and, the hole's going to be open for a considerable amount of time. You got storms, you got vibration, I didn't read anywhere in any report where it considered that this will have no undue effects on
I believe that is a function of the building department when they actually see the plans for the structure this gentleman is going to build, and it may be a requirement of the building department that soil testing be done to ensure that there is no off-site, what I will consider off-site damage. Mr. Rowe, would you wish to comment on that particular matter?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm not an expert on building design. I would agree that it would be managed through the building department, but just to echo the comments that were in the previous meeting in the write-up, it was the notion that functionally against your property, this would be the side of the dwelling. And with that reduced setback, it restricts the amount of glazing on the side. And we're also subject to the design approval of the municipality. So efforts can be made to work and develop a design that's maybe not considered intrusive to yourself when designing that building in matters of overlook.
Okay, I wasn't talking about overlook. I was talking about the hole you're going to dig for the house and how that may affect the soil next to my pool, because my pool's only...
Sir, I think that is something that'll have to be considered by the building department
All right,
at the time of the issuance of the building. Am I correct on that, Mrs. Weens?
Mr. Chair, through you, that would be something that we would look at that time, correct?
Okay. He answered a totally different question, that's all. He talked about overlook. It wasn't what we were...
Well, he was talking about overlook, which was one of your concerns that you mentioned before.
It is, but yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, now we're looking at possible damage because of the excavation. And I'm saying, and Mrs. Weens has reaffirmed it, this would be something that would be looked at during the building permit issuance stage.
Okay, I'd like to touch on intensification. Part of the official plan, A 3.3, deals with employment. It seems hard to justify this intensification in a town with so few good-paying jobs. Apart from a handful of public sector jobs and small business owners, there are not many jobs that pay the kind of salary it would take to afford a house here. The vast majority of people commute elsewhere for these types of jobs, as there are no large employers in Fawn Hill. So it seems like adding more homes is going to add more commuters to the greater scheme of things, as there's not, it's not like this, people are going to walk downtown to their job. Touching on the walkability of this property, there was an exception made on the 100-meter range because of the walkability factor, but the truth is most people commute and use their cars extensively, and they get things on their way home when they're coming home from work, because there's not the jobs to support the houses that are being built in this town, to tell you the truth. So I don't know how that squares that circle with providing the jobs necessary as well to support the intensification. It's just a point I wanted to make about that. So now back to this about in the last meeting you stated that the Fawn Hill lumber site were not considered as part of the 15%. Is the arena not also not considered as part of that 15%?
Once again, the official plan, my recollection of the official plan and the documents in it, the two schedules A1 and A2, areas of intensification are shown by a little star in several parts of the plan. As I will recall, I think Davis Hall area, which is up the Lathrop property on Haste Road, was one intensification area. I believe there are properties on the north and south sides of Canberra Road, west of Hay Street, have been identified as intensification areas. I also believe the arena is one, and there are two intensification areas, what I call Lot 177, which is that block of land east of Pelham Street, south of Merritt, north of Quaker, and west of Clare Avenue. I believe so. Those are I believe 6 intensification areas that the town considered to be intensification areas, or thought they could be intensified as part of, well, I guess in our 2014 official plan. One of the things, what was happening now, there are also in Schedule A2, which is the Fenwick area, there are areas of intensification shown in that drawing too. And it was believed, at the time the official plan was put together, that those 6 or 8 or 9 intensification areas identified could possibly serve or satisfy the 300 unit requirement as laid down by the province and the region. It's my understanding, and I'll ask Mrs. Weens to confirm whether I'm correct or not, but the the province basically said to the region, somewhere along the way, you're going to have to figure out how to put this many new lots or residential units in the region of Niagara. And the region of Niagara, in consultation with its area municipalities, eventually came up with maybe the city of St. Catharines had to do so many and Fort Erie had to do so many, and they had to be within the urban boundaries. And Pelham was lucky enough that we got saddled with 300 units. Mm-hmm. And I guess if you look at the official plan and you look at the areas that were identified in the official plan as intensification areas, it's hopefully that the town of Pelham's requirement could be met. It is also one of the policies in our official plan. Basically, B1.13 residential. For the purpose of the plan, residential intensification is defined as the development or redevelopment of existing vacant land or underutilized land within the existing urban areas of Fonthill and Fenwick into building types that more efficiently use the existing urban space and services. In reviewing intensification proposals, the town will assess the density of such proposals relative to the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the site and building design of the proposal. Our planning department has spent quite a bit of time in their reports answering those particular questions. They've just answered the question you had. The design of the proposal. And Mr. Rojas said that the design of the proposal might be able to accommodate a visual, stop some of the visual intrusion from your property. So there are things in our official plan that have been identified, and there are things in our official plan that the planning department have said. The other thing, one of the bullets in their official plan under B1.1.3 is, well, intensification opportunities will be encouraged. Proponents will be expected to demonstrate through the provision of detailed site plans and elevation plans that such proposals will be respectful of, compatible with, and designed to be integrated with the community or neighborhood where they are proposed. Some of the conditions, if this particular consent is granted, there are conditions being put forth by our director of planning that would help ameliorate some of these perceived deficiencies. Am I correct, Mrs. Weens?
Mr. Chair, through you, I mean, certainly the conditions that speak to design and speak to the installation of street trees are aimed at those policies looking towards fit and compatibility, yes.
So I hope that in a way I've kind of alleviated your concerns. It is recognized that intensification is going to cause problems in some of the existing neighborhoods. To carry on with that particular item, one of the next paragraphs, in considering proposals for residential intensification, the following criteria are applicable to intensification proposals within the urban living area designation. I will read a couple of these particular things, particularly B. Basically Schedule A1 and A2, which is item A, identifies the number of areas, good candidates for a residential intensification. B states, intensification and redevelopment proposals are encouraged to achieve a unit density and housing type that is in keeping with the character of the density of the neighborhood where it is proposed. Well, this is one unit. It's not really changing the density of the neighborhood all that much. But there might be other factors. C, residential intensification and redevelopment proposals located on lands which abut local roads shall maintain the unit density and unit type of the surrounding neighborhood, but may through a zoning bylaw amendment increase the unit density of it to 25%. Well, we're not looking at a zoning bylaw at this particular time. And it would appear that the developer is proposing a single-family residential house. He's not asked for a two-story because basically, from what we've read in the application, it's not a two-story development. Item D says, notwithstanding items B and C, the creation of a new freehold or vacant condominium infill lots through the consent process for ground-oriented detached dwellings, which this particular developer is going to build, may be permitted provided the proposed lot and unit type is similar to and compatible with the established character of the street or neighborhood where it is proposed. Based on the application that we have received, it would appear that is currently the intent. I can't tell you. I can't gaze into the future and actually tell you what this gentleman is proposing, other than he has identified a footprint that he would like to build on within the conveyed lot. To make that legal, he's asking to allow him to build within that footprint. He's asking us to look at a number of variances: side yard setback, front yard setback, width of the lot, a number of variances to the existing bylaw to what I term basically legalize the R1 use of that lot. Okay, so let's look at the policies we have. Let us look at the variances that he is proposing, and we as a committee of council, an appointed committee of council, have to decide whether this is in the best interest of the town of Pelham, of which you are the ratepayers. So continue with your presentation. I hope I've answered the majority of your concerns.
Okay, well, it clearly states in their report that there's no guarantee that it's going to be a one-story bungalow. There's no conditions on it being a two-story. So the expression that he's going to build a one-story is speculative, because they clearly state that they couldn't stop him from building a two-story. So
there is a particular provision in the zoning bylaw that says that if you're going to a two-story, the footprint of the building is somewhat less than if it is, what is it? Curtis, you're going to have to help me on this one.
Through the chair. It's I know which provision you're speaking about. It's just like the minimum floor area requirement.
That's the one.
If it's a one-story, it's larger. If it's a two-story, the minimum floor area requirement is a little bit less. But yeah. So
the bylaw does. If he came in and said, "Look, and I only want to build on a footprint of 800 and something, 600 and something square meters," that's the footprint. Well, then you're almost automatically looking at a two-story. If it's going to be something larger, I don't have the copy of my zoning bylaw with me.
I happen to have it here, and I can answer your question for both R1 and.
Just particularly, Mr. Miranda, would you please give it to us strictly for R1?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miranda.
Your R1.
Okay.
Not your R2.
We're just dealing with R1 zoning tonight.
But it should be R2.
We're amending, his variances are related to R1. Minimum lot area is 700 square meters. Minimum lot frontage is 19. Maximum lot coverage 30%. Now, minimum ground floor area for a dwelling. If it is a one-story, it's 115.5 square meters. If it's two stories, it's 78 square meters. So if you look at
I read that.
if you look at the footprint that he's saying he wants to build within,
Right.
it is over 115.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I get it.
If it had been 78 or 80, he probably would add in the application he's building a two-story house. However, once again, I can't speculate. He's not asking for a variance on the minimum ground floor area of the dwelling. That is item I in the zoning requirements for R1.
Okay, so I found 7 comments in this report related to privacy. They mentioned the setbacks being closer to the fence would reduce the amount of unwanted overlook and so on. Given that there are no guarantees that this is going to be a one-story and could possibly be a two-story, how can the planning department make the assessment that they don't see any negative effects on our privacy you know, when basically he could just build a 2-story and have windows with 100% overlook onto our property. To say that there's no effect on our privacy is just false, really.
Okay. I need the assistance of our planning department and also from the consultants' representatives on this particular matter. I'm sure they've had discussions with the owner, and maybe they can give us and enlighten us a little bit on that matter. Thank you, Mr. Owen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as part of our efforts when I was working with the applicant on this, I did recommend to him a 1-story dwelling is going to be much more compatible, and it would fit better. We also have the control through the approval of the minor variance requires that we need to submit our elevations to town staff and for the sign off of the director. So all the comments that have been brought forward, concerns about how it looks, how it functions, all the checks and balances are provided there through the planning department. And it is still, to the best of my knowledge, is still our client's intent to build a 1-story or a single-story bungalow dwelling. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. I hope that satisfies. Mrs. Weens, do you have any comments you may wish to add on this? Is this also a function of the building permit application process, approval process?
Mr. Chair, through you, certainly we have the sign off on the building elevations, and that is a reason for that condition to be put in. And it's not a function of the building permit process, but prior to issuing of the building permit, we would sign off on that condition with regards to the building elevation design.
Thank you, Mrs. Weens. Does that satisfy your concern at the moment?
No, not really. Can we attach conditions that would make sure that happens? Because it says right in this report that there is no guarantee that a 2-story house cannot be built on this property. It's their words. It said there's no guarantee on that. So, I mean, a 2-story house is going to be...
Mr. Chair, through you, the zoning does permit in terms of the height of the building. It would permit the ability to have a 2-story dwelling. That's permitted now in all the R1 zone requirements. As somebody who lives in a 2-story dwelling, next door to a 1-story dwelling, I don't believe it's an issue. We don't sit in our 2-story dwellings and look out onto people and what they're doing. That's not of any interest to us.
Do you have any other comments that are pertinent that should be addressed by this committee in our decision? I can't offer you something. I can't make you a promise that can't be fulfilled as a condition of the variances.
Right.
Okay, so you're asking me to give you a condition that I don't believe we can actually honor.
The planning department would not have the power to attach such a condition, or?
Mr. Chair, through you again, we have the condition of the building design to ensure compatibility. The zoning bylaw does permit a 2-story dwelling in an R1 zone. But we understand from the applicant that their desire is to build a bungalow. If they were to come in and apply for a 2-story building, we would have to sign off on the building elevations. There are matters with regards to your privacy being protected. That's why we have that issue that condition on the minor variance.
Okay. The other part of that is that the lot reorientation really amplifies that problem because the surrounding properties are developed already, and it's kind of hard for us to change what we have. And I mean, I'm looking at how I could create privacy buffers because there is no room on the other property really for. The privacy is going to have to come at the expense of our properties. If there's even one window on the west side of that, it's going to be intrusive. So
Thank you for your comments. Is there anything else you wish to add before we see if someone else wishes to speak?
Just give me a second here. I had some talk about the trees. I think we've heard enough about the trees, but there's also a white elderberry tree that is on the border between 9 Highland and this property. I can't see it being saved as it be right, the excavation is going to be right next to it. So that's 3 mature trees. I also have an oak tree on my property that's 12 feet from the property line in both directions. It's a good spot for an oak tree. It can grow 100 years there and grow to massive proportions. It's 40 feet away from my house and 60 feet away from the house behind me and 50 feet away from my neighbor's house. It's nowhere near anybody's house to cause a problem. But essentially, you're going to park a house that's going to be under this tree. So I'm looking at it like I may as well cut it down now, because anybody who knows oak trees knows about the acorns. So in the future, this tree is going to rain acorns down on this roof, which would provide justification for cutting it down if that's happening to your neighbor's roof. So that's a 4th mature tree that's going to be destroyed during this process. Because if I cut it down now, it'll be considerably cheaper than if I wait 10 years and get complaints from the neighbor with the acorns. So anyway, that just leads to the loss of canopy and all the effects that has, and the cost of me having to remove this tree, because now it's in an inappropriate spot, now that there's going to be a house 4 feet from my back fence. So.
Thank you very much for bringing up your concern related to the one of the variances is the reduction in the side yard setback, which this actually becomes. Anything else?
Back to intensification,
We've had enough on intensification, thank you. Can we move on?
I had a question about the town's plan for getting these 300 houses in there, because if you look at the A5 map, it seems the only way it's possible is to start bulldozing houses and replacing them with 2. Is there a clear plan to where these 300 homes are going to go, or are we just going to hope it happens?
As I pointed out to you earlier, the official plan of the town of Pelham, there are 2 schedules, A1 and A2. Intensification areas have been identified on those drawings.
And this
and
is
it
not,
is hoped.
This
and
is
it
not
is,
in that area.
It doesn't, and it is hoped that the town's requirement of 300 units will be satisfied with the intensification of those areas that are already shown in the official plan.
Okay.
Is that correct, Mrs. Weens? Is my assumption correct?
Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay, but this is outside those identified areas for intensification. It's also outside the 100-meter exception.
This is true.
Okay.
It is a minimum 300 units. If there are other areas, or maybe the town could accommodate more, but each one of those will become subject of probably a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment. Okay? Any comments, Mrs. Weens or Mr. Thompson?
No, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rowe?
No, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mahoney? Thank you. Maybe I should ask the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment if I'm stepping out of line on some of this, but I don't think I am. Because you're bringing up points that were discussed at the previous meeting, and we have said that
Right.
we're only supposed to be dealing with comments related to the addendum report currently in front of us presented. We have already considered a number of the things you've brought up, and I've tried to be patient with you. So please proceed.
I will give up the floor here. I just wanted to have responses to the answers we were given on our questions the last time, because I didn't think it got discussed in detail, but fine. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the applications currently in front of us this evening? Well, thank you very much, everyone. Now, members of the committee, do you have any questions or comments you wish to make with regard to the applications in front of us this evening?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Secretary Treasurer of the committee, is there any reason that I or members of this committee cannot adopt a legal opinion, an unsolicited legal opinion from the applicant's solicitor in my decision-making?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the counsel is here on behalf, the legal counsel is here on behalf of his client. He is not here on behalf of the town. So it would be up to the solicitor, but I would presume that that would not be appropriate. He's here on behalf of the applicant.
The reason for the question is he gave an unsolicited opinion as to how to handle this application. And I would like to adopt that opinion.
The legal counsel is here speaking on behalf of his client, the applicant. So his legal opinion would have been solicited by his client.
It's unsolicited by this committee.
He's here representing his client. Perhaps the solicitor would like to add something to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps if you want to be more clear as the opinion that you're looking for. But I've certainly have given legal advice to my client. That is also a confidential matter as well. And I am not the solicitor for the town of Pelham, nor am I solicitor.
I understand that. You ventured that it would be possible to grant the consent conditional upon a successful rezoning. Do you stand by that opinion?
I do, and I've seen it before. Through you, Mr. Chair, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, based on that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent conditional upon the rezoning of the subject lands to permit the proposed development.
Do I have a second? Before we proceed with the motion, Mr. Law, do you have any comments to make on the proposal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, I do not.
Well, in this case, I would like to make a few comments.
Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Chair, there's a motion. There's a motion on the floor that has to be dealt with.
Do I have a seconder for the motion on the floor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no.
And I will not second the motion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have a whole bunch of comments to make on this application.
Proceed, Mr. Sheldon.
In reference to intensification, one of the items in the definition is the development of vacant or underutilized lots within previous developed areas. I am not of the opinion that the original lot that we're talking about, it's obviously not vacant, and I certainly am not of the opinion that it's underutilized. There was a comment made that basically what you're doing is building a house in a backyard. And I am of that opinion. I am also of the opinion that if this definition is applied to the neighborhood, as I suggested the neighborhood would be, that extends out to Pelham Road, Canberra Road, south, where we have an assemblage of 100 by 200 foot lots. If 100 by 200 foot residential lots with a house on it is considered underutilized, this town and this neighborhood is in huge trouble. Somebody made the opinion, let me see who it was, Mr. Galata. In many cases, areas surrounding the new infill development were built before the need for stormwater controls was recognized and are already experiencing stormwater management problems. Here's the operative term. Although the development of single individual infill sites may not have significant impacts, the development of many individual sites can have cumulative effects and exacerbate or create problems at the watershed, whatever. That principle, the development of single individual infill lots may not have significant impacts. The development of many individual sites can have cumulative effects and exacerbate or create problems. Also applies to land development. So one or two severances of a lot into one or two new lots, who cares? The cumulative effect of many of these applications is huge. And it goes against, in my opinion, if you can apply that principle, the same principle that's applied to stormwater, you can apply it to residential development. Official plan A232. Let me find my way here, because I thought I was going to not have to do this. Objectives, urban character, A2.3, A2.32. Objectives, bullet point number 2, to respect the character of existing development and ensure that all applications for development are physically compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Not in my opinion, particularly with no guarantee to these people of what built form they're going to get on this lot. Bullet point number 4, to maintain and enhance the character and stability of existing well-established residential neighborhoods by ensuring that development and redevelopment is compatible with the scale and density of existing development. This application does not meet that bullet point, in my opinion. Next bullet point, to ensure that the new development areas are integrated into the fabric of the existing community in conformity with approved secondary plan. There's no secondary plan. I went through that in the last application, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but these people deserve a secondary plan. The fabric of a community, the social side, the soft side of this application has never been addressed. It's all, the planning report in and of itself is second to none. It is a complete technical analysis. Anybody in this room cannot expect a better analysis. it does not refer or help us with the fuzzy side of compatibility, the warp and woof, the fabric of the community, the disruption factor that this application has, the potential future disruption that this application may have. We know that it's a stated fact that an application, a successful application or an unsuccessful application does not create a precedent, but we are also very well aware that if there's one, there's going to be more. There's 4 tests for the variances. Test number 1, variance is minor in nature. Part of the planning department's response to that, the variances are considered minor in nature as no adverse impacts are anticipated from the requested variance. From a technical point of view and a land use point of view, they're probably right. From a social community fabric point of view, a stability point of view, and a character point of view, I disagree 100%. The variance is desirable for the development or use of the land. Planning response. The variances to reduce the minimum lot area and lot frontage are desirable for the lands because it will allow for the creation of additional residential lot on a fairly large underutilized open space. Mr. Chairman, that
Baffled.
I don't think that comment should be entertained. The variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The variance is seeking reductions to the minimum lot area and lot frontage provisions, maintain the general intent of the zoning bylaw because they will continue allowing for single-family detached residential dwellings in low-density R1 zone, albeit on a slightly smaller parcel. Just let that one sink in. The proposed lot area and lot frontage are still in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood, not just those dwellings immediately adjacent. One of the people made a brief analysis. Average lot size, 1,100 square meters. I would suspect that the average frontage is 100 feet or more. I cannot understand how this comment was made. This application does not, in my opinion, maintain the general intent and purpose of the existing zoning bylaw. The size of the lot and the size of the homes in this area, the size of the lots particularly, bear no relationship to what is being proposed. In the addendum, page 52, the creation of in the red print, at the hearing of January 14th, 2020, the committee did ponder whether or not a rezoning was warranted. As mentioned above, zoning bylaw amendments are allowed to request changes in the list of permitted uses, whereas minor variance applications are generally restricted to amending the numeric provisions. how does that answer the question? So the zoning bylaw has certain powers that we don't, but I don't think in terms of the effect that this application has versus a rezoning. There have been and are pages and pages and pages of reasons not to approve this as a minor variance, ergo my previous motion, that it is, in my opinion, the subject of a rezoning that involves the political decision makers in this town who should be made aware of the implication, the future implications of what this particular application could mean going down the road. So in short, it's not minor in nature, in my opinion. It does not meet the general intent and purpose of the existing zoning bylaw. The desirability for the development or use of the land is very much in question, and I would come down on the side of no. And there are many real and potential effects that this if successful, that this application would make on the social fabric of the community, including it does not add to the stability of the community, and it does not add to the character of the community. Based on my comments just made, I will be voting to turn this application down.
Mr. Law, do you have any comments you wish to make regarding this application, or any questions you may wish to ask?
Thank you. This is on.
I forgot to turn it on. Mr. Law.
Thank you. As you remember last month, we worked hard together at the last meeting to try to make this happen, but we couldn't. It was just too overwhelming. We needed time to research and review all of these files and all of the legal ramifications that came across this file. Our planning department here has done a fabulous job of bringing to the front what the province of Ontario wants us to obey with respect to land division and severances. They've been very clear with their statements, and I commend them for giving us this information to work with. Also, you, the people of the town that come, Mr. Galata brought 44, is that right? More signatures?
No. Mr. Miranda.
Mr. Miranda, 44 more signatures, 20 last month. So, in respect to our people of our community, I think we as a committee here have to also pay attention to our taxpayers. So we have all spent a great deal of time putting this together, and I'm going to read however, some of it's already been said, because these guys have done a fabulous job, but the community vision for the town of Pelham for the official plan as written in A2 goals and objectives, to the plan to maintain, enhance, or restore ecosystem health and integrity. A2332 objectives to respect the character of existing development and ensure that all applications for development and physically compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhoods, to maintain and enhance the character and stability of existing and well-established residential neighborhoods. by ensuring that the development is compatible with the scale and density of the existing development. A251 infrastructure is the goal of this plan to ensure that all infrastructure, including sanitary sewers, water distribution, and stormwater management facilities, public service facilities, and roads meets the needs of present and future residents and businesses. In my opinion, with 2 visual visits to this location, I found that an excessive amount of rain and snow and leaves accumulated at the top of Elizabeth Drive is very excessive and flows down easterly direction, causing a very dangerous drive with lots of slush and ice collecting at the intersection of Allen Crescent and Elizabeth Drive. At the last meeting, I asked the representative at Mancini Development Corp. where was the roof runoff water going. His reply was down the driveway to Elizabeth Drive. This answer is a major concern. In reviewing the comment from the town engineer, indicated we do not need any more roof rainwater dumped on Elizabeth Drive. Directing the rainwater down the driveway to Elizabeth Drive is not a solution to the problem. Intensification B113 Schedule A1 better introduce the creation of a new freehold or vacant condominium infill lots through the consent process. For ground-oriented detached dwellings may be permitted, providing the proposed lot and unit type is similar to and compatible with the established character of the street or neighborhood where it is proposed. The zoning bylaw shall establish minimum lot area and frontages and minimum and maximum densities which are considered appropriate within the urban living area designation. To the town, from the Committee of Adjustment, the subject parcel shown Part 1 on the attached sketch has 14.2 meters of frontage on the south side of Elizabeth Drive, lying west of Allen Crescent, being part of Lot 18, Plan 721 of the town of Pelham. This application is asking for 5 minor adjustments on this land zone residential R1 in accordance with Pelham zoning bylaw 1136, 1987, as amended. Application is made for relief from the bylaw to facilitate construction of a residential dwelling as follows. Section 13.2, minimum lot area permit a minimum lot area of 432 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 700 meters square. There are 4 minor variances listed. My interpretation is not minor, but of a major nature. I have personally spent many hours reading into this file, trying to find a compatible solution. However, I find my thinking conflicting in this matter. So, what are we to think? Who's right? Can there be a right view and a wrong view in this issue as complicated as this? Christopher Hitchens once wrote, "Views don't really count. It matters not what you think, but how you think." In other words, how did you arrive at what you think? The trouble with certainty, he went on to say, is that it removes the need to reconcile incompatible ideas. It exempts us from the pain of changing our minds, certainly keeping us safe in our separate silos. Therefore, in my opinion, I must rely on the facts presented, the current bylaws of our town, and an open mind that includes reasonable requests. I must conclude my thoughts and say that I do not agree with the minor variance report as noted above, and deny this application for the residential land severance.
Thank you, Mr. Law. The chairman has his own comments, and I'll go through them. Basically, it's this. In reviewing the planning reports, both from the previous meeting and this meeting, the rationale for granting this application put forth by our planning department is basically to tick off a number of applicable planning policies at provincial, regional, and local government levels. On page 34 of the agenda, reference is made to section 5124 of the Planning Act, which outlines a number of considerations your committee, meaning this committee, of adjustment must consider prior to coming to a decision whether to grant or deny a conveyance. Planning Act, consolidated July 2016, section 5124 states that when considering the division of land, regard shall be had to the health, safety, convenience, accessibility, and welfare of the present and future inhabitants of the municipality, and among other things to consider the following. A, the development's effect on provincial matters of interest. The planning report ticks this box off. Provincial policy statement, growth plan are discussed further in their report. Not necessarily the way I would like them, but they are discussed. B, whether the proposed subdivision is premature in the public interest. Planning report, tick off as proposed lot is okay, because not much else can be done with the existing lot fabric in the neighborhood. It's already developed. Okay. C, whether the plan conforms to the official plan and adjacent plans of the subdivision, if any. The planning report says that this should be ticked off as the proposal does not compromise the adjacent subdivision parcel fabric as it works within the existing confines of the existing corner lot. I basically disagree with this statement. In my reading of the town's official plan, I wish to quote the following. Section A, 2.3, urban character. Now, under section A, 2.3, the goal is stated as this. It is the goal of this plan to protect and enhance the character of the existing urban area. Makes sense to me. Okay. Also under that is section A 2.3.2 objectives. The fourth point in that particular section was alluded to by Mr. Sheldon, to maintain and enhance the character and stability of the existing and well-established residential neighborhoods by ensuring that the development and redevelopment is compatible with the scale and density of the existing development. I looked at this particular conveyance. It does not, in my opinion, satisfy that condition. D, the suitability of the land for such purposes. The planning report suggests this box should be ticked off as currently the neighborhood consists of predominantly lower density ground-oriented residential dwellings. And this proposal would add an additional single detached residential dwelling under the current zoning regulations. Okay, I disagree with this statement also. Yes, in terms of a Zone 1 classification, R1, I can agree. However, as to legalize the lot being created, in other words, the conveyance, which is shown as Part 1 on the sketch attached to the application, a total of 5 variances to the existing zoning bylaw will need to be granted. And those are pretty major variances. Frontage, lot area. Those are big items as far as I'm concerned to ensure the compatibility of the neighborhood. In addition, 3 variances will be needed to be granted to legalize the R1 zoning for the remnant parcel, shown as Part 2 on the sketch attached to the application. Individually, each of the variances being requested may or could be considered minor in nature, but when viewed together holistically, they completely alter the intent and requirements under our existing Zone 1 regulations. That is my opinion. F, the dimensions and shapes of the proposed lots. Well, the planning report suggests you can tick this box off as the dimensions and shape of the lot being created are within neighborhood development standards and can be comfortably support a new dwelling? Well, my answer to this is maybe. Yes, the lot being created is probably within current development standards of what now is considered a traditional subdivision lot. But is this conveyance as proposed in keeping with the existing lot fabric of the neighborhood? No. Does it meet the test of maintaining and enhancing the character and stability of the existing well-established residential neighborhood? And is the redevelopment proposed compatible with the scale and density of the existing development? Neighborhood is outlined under Section A of the Pelham Official Plan, and more specifically, the goal and objective statements, urban character, in my opinion, is no. Okay, so let's look at this a little further. Currently, there is a house at 20 Allen Crescent that sits on a residential lot of approximately 1,270 plus or minus square meters. Based on the size and configuration of the lot, noting that it is a corner lot, it could be subdivided in a different manner, with lot sizes in the order of 600 plus or minus square meters, which would be more in keeping with the current lot fabric. In other words, what's there currently, and your lot's adjacent to the property. And would probably require fewer variances to the existing bylaw to legalize the lots that I'm suggesting could be created. H, conservation of natural resources and flood control. Tick this box off. The planning report mentions that a couple of trees could be affected, but no overall natural resources are impacted because of this redevelopment. Flood control. Our engineering department requested an overall lot grading and drainage plan for the parcels being created or retained, demonstrate that drainage does not negatively impact neighboring properties. We've heard that, yes, the engineering department recognized that there is currently an issue with storm drainage in this general area of the neighborhood, whether it be on Elizabeth Street or Allen Crescent. And over time, hopefully, the town will be able to rectify this particular problem. We're still dealing with section, whatever the section is, I've forgotten already. The adequacy of utilities and municipal services. Tick this box off. Yes, Allen Crescent and Elizabeth Street are currently serviced with municipal water and sanitary sewers. A storm sewer system appears to have been installed on Elizabeth Street, as evidenced by the observation of catch basins and manhole covers marked storm sewer. The committee is aware of the comments of the residents regarding storm drainage, and various and a number of problems being reported. Based on the conditions requested by the engineering department, they seem to be very aware of the residents' concerns. Item J. You forget A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I? Okay, well, anyway. Adequate school sites. I can agree, ticking this box off, as schools are within easy walking distance. The planning report fails to address an item under section 5124 being criteria G. Restrictions or proposed restrictions, if any, on land being proposed to be subdivided or the buildings and structures proposed to be erected. The restrictions, if any, on adjoining land. As noted earlier, to legalize the subdivision of land within the context of the current zoning bylaw, a total of 8 variances need to be granted by this committee. At this time, I cannot support the granting of the conveyance and or the variance applications being requested by the applicant, as the impact on the existing neighborhood is not warranted and should not be allowed. And those are my comments. So, now that you've heard some of the concerns of the members, Mr. Rowe or Mr. Maloney, do you wish to respond in any manner? And I will also be asking members of our staff.
To you, Mr. Chair, no further comments. Thank you.
Mrs. Weens.
Mr. Chair, no, we don't have any further. Thank you.
Gentlemen, are there any comments from the public you wish to add before we render a decision or make a motion? Yes, sir.
Yep.
Does
the decision Is that it? Okay. Does the committee decision tonight become the position of the town if there is an appeal?
I'll ask that, I'll put that question to the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. Mrs. Bizzano, can you respond to this, please?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The position of the Committee of Adjustment will be the decision of the committee. Upon appeal, there may be a request for evidence provided by the planners to support their reports, but the position of the committee is the final decision and the one that would be subject to appeal in either event, whether it's granted or refused.
And who defends or presents the position of the committee or of the town at appeal?
Mrs. Bizzano, could you assist me in answering this question? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the entire record would be provided to the local planning appeals tribunal, including the full set of minutes. There would be a link to all of the hearings, the decisions, all of the planning reports, all of the submissions by the public would be provided as the town's submission to defend the decision of the Committee of Adjustment.
So it will not be the committee that will be at that committee. It will not be the committee that will be at the appeal. It will be the planning department. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the committee members will not be in attendance at the appeal hearing. The planning department would only be there if they are requested by either of the parties, subject to the appeal. But the decision of the Committee of Adjustment must state reasons if the application is to be refused, and those reasons would be the committee's stand on the applications at the LPAT.
And last question, would the comments by the three members of the committee as expressed tonight very eloquently and passionately be presented to the appeal process?
Mrs. Bizzano?
Through you again, Mr. Chair. The comments are included in the record, a full set of minutes. Minutes under the planning, public hearings under the Planning Act are much more detailed than other sets of minutes. So the comments of the members would be incorporated into their reasons should they refuse the applications, and the full set of minutes is provided to the appeals tribunal. Anyone who has expressed an interest in the application, through you, Mr. Chair, will also be advised of any subsequent hearing dates with the appeal tribunal.
And at the appeals process, would the citizens or citizenry group be allowed to bring legal representation?
Mrs. Bizzano, it's my understanding, yes, the citizens would be able to retain their own legal representatives. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the citizens will have achieved what is referenced as status at the LPAT appeal hearing because they have either submitted comments, written comments, or oral submissions at the hearing. So they will be notified of the appeal hearing, and they will have to seek status through the appeals tribunal if they wish to be represented by a lawyer. I'm sorry, I can't give legal advice, so I can't answer that question. We would have to review the tribunal rules and regulations in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, gentlemen, are we ready to render a decision on the matter of application B11-219 concerning the conveyance at 20 Allen Crescent? Can I have someone please make a motion?
I'll make that motion
That?
to deny the application.
We have 3 applications, Mr. Chairman. And the reasons for denying the application has been more or less enunciated by the 3 of us.
Yes.
I think I could actually,
Mr. Chairman, I am not against, for a number of reasons that will become apparent in the future, to go against the severance or the consent on the merits of the consent, I think is wrong. To go against the two applications for a minor variance for the various reasons that have been espoused here, I think are correct. That leaves if the severance is granted and the variances are let's say they're refused, that leaves the applicant two options. He can appeal to LPAT, or he can apply for a rezoning covering off the variances. I think in principle, the applicant has a very good case. He has an excellent case for the severance. I think the case for the variances are very weak. I don't think they should be granted by this committee. But I do think that the subject matter that has been the subject of discussion for 3 hours should be brought as a rezoning to the council of this municipality so that the councillors are made aware of the threats that this community is under, and that everything that's been said here should be presented to council, and let the politicians face these people and make that decision. That was the reason for my original motion, to accept the severance or the consent conditional on a rezoning, which gets this whole thing before council, before a planning committee and council, where everybody can face the politicians and make their case. Is it appropriate, madam? Can I make that motion again, or is it a dead issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, right now there is a motion on the floor. It hasn't yet been seconded. A seconder, just in parliamentary process, a seconder gets the motion on the floor to be voted on. Right now there is a motion to deny the application for severance. If the application for severance is granted, then you deal with the minor variance applications as a separate entity, whereupon a motion could be made at that time to approve or deny. Right now, the motion on the floor needs a seconder for debate, and the motion is to deny the consent application.
For the purposes of debate, I will second the motion. But I'm making my point. I just made my point in terms of debate, that I believe the consent should be granted subject to or conditional upon the rezoning of the subject lands to permit the proposed developments. So you have a seconder, which does not necessarily mean that I'm going to vote in favor of it.
So, Mr. Chair, you have a mover and a seconder to deny application B11, 2019.
Yes. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. The reasons for denying the application are related to sections of our current official plan. Currently, Section A, 2.3, urban character. I do not believe this particular application satisfies the goal of enunciated in A 2.3.1, nor the objectives, particularly to maintain and enhance the character and stability of the existing well-established neighborhood, which is an objective which is A 2.3.2. I'm also having difficulty rationalizing the use of intensification target. One of the policies that we have in our official plan regarding residential intensification, policy B1.1.3, residential intensification, has a number of criteria which need to be met. I am concerned that this particular application does not satisfy items B, C, and D. Also, in our official plan, there's section D called subdivision of land. In particular, I'm referring to section D 5.2, new lots by consent. D 5.2.1, general criteria. Prior to considering an application to create a new lot for any purpose, the Committee of Adjustment shall be satisfied that the proposed lot A fronts on and will be directly accessed by a public road. This particular will not cause a traffic hazard result of its location on a curve or hill. What I object to is I don't believe this conveyance is covered under item C, is in keeping with the intent of relevant provisions and performance standards of the zoning bylaw because of the number of variances that are required to legalize either the conveyed lot or the remnant lot. I do not consider this a boundary adjustment. In addition, since we are looking at variances at the same time, mind you, the variances we will not need to look at the variances. But one of the problems I have, in accordance with the Planning Council, it will appoint variances, and one of the things we need to look at under the 4 test, that the request variance is minor. The individual variances, all 8 of them, may be minor in nature individually, but when taken holistically for both the severed or the conveyance and the remnant parcel are major. They basically gut the requirements of our zoning bylaw, whether it be frontage, whether it be lot area, lot coverage. I'm sorry, this just goes beyond my comprehension that would be taking so many variances to legalize the lots being created. And I think this is one of the reasons my friend Bill has said maybe this should be resolved by council through a zoning bylaw. I will leave that up to the intent of the owner of the property. And with that,
Through you, Mr. Chair.
those are the reasons. Yes.
I would suggest that because the Planning Act does require the Committee of Adjustment to render a decision on the minor variance applications, and because they were submitted concurrently, that the Committee of Adjustment render a decision to issue a technical refusal on both of the minor variances because
The lot is not created.
The severance did not succeed. So then you have a decision, but we can also cite reasons as stated by the committee in those technical refusals.
And
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Secretary. If an appeal is successful, what happens to the minor variance portion of this application?
The local appeals tribunal would want to hear all of the applications concurrently. So that's the reason I'm suggesting that you need to make a decision on the minor variance applications, because all three applications would likely to be appealed together. LPAT would only turn it back to the local municipality and say, if there is a minor variance or a zoning amendment associated with this consent application, it needs to have a decision, which is why I'm recommending you make a decision on those minor variances. LPAT wants to hear all of those together.
In that regard, we need to have a motion with regard. In that regard, we need to have a motion with regard to minor variance application A28-2019, 20 Allen Crescent. In this particular application, there are 5 variances. Section 13.2A, minimum lot area to permit a lot area of 432 meters squared, whereas 700 is required. B is the second one. Section 13.2B, minimum lot frontage to permit a lot frontage of 14.2 meters, whereas 19 meters is required. Item C, section 13.2C, maximum lot coverage to permit lot frontage of 45%, where lot coverage, not frontage, lot coverage of 45%, whereas 30% is required. 13.2D, minimum front yard to permit a front yard of 5 meters, whereas 7.5 is required. Section 13.2E, minimum pure side yard to permit an interior side yard of 1.2, whereas 1.8 is required. The 2 variances, minimum lot area and lot frontage, required to legalize proposed lot and facilitate the severance approval, while the other 3 variances are merely desired by the applicant. As a chairman, I would request somebody move granting or denial of the variances as listed.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that application A28/2019P and A29/2019P be denied on the basis that, and the reasons given are, 1, the variances requested are not minor in nature. 2, the variances requested do not meet the general intent and purposes of the existing zoning bylaw. And number 3, the variances applied for are not desirable for the development or use of the land.
And have a significant impact on the existing.
I'm not going that far because I don't know what impact it will have. And the only reason I have to give is that it doesn't meet the criteria that are laid, the four criteria. We only have to deny the variances based on 1 criteria. I'm basing it on 3.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Carried.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not sure yet.
No minutes, Mr. Chairman. No minutes, Mr. Chairman.
We have no minutes, so yes, a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Sheldon, seconded by Mr.
Law.
Mr. Law. All in favor? Carried.
Something to help us.